Just recognized for any questions he may have.
First, let me just say I would associate myself to remarks of the gentleman from Kentucky and South Carolina about my appreciation for what you, Mr. Lawler, have been doing and trying to promote what I think is most obviously to anyone viewing a sincere belief and effort to represent your constituents here, which is what we're supposed to do in our Republican form of government, and fight for them and what they're telling you that they care about and what you see that they care about. I think, as the gentleman knows, I've been working as much as I know how to work in recent days and over the recent months to try to figure out how to answer this particular question for you and for some other colleagues. And you know, I'll admit here in front of God and this panel and everybody watching that I'm conflicted. I'm conflicted because I want you to get the vote. I don't believe this is how we should be doing it. I believe, like the gentleman from Kentucky, that we should have had a more open rule on the tax bill that we voted on last night. I believe we should have had amendments and had the ability to let this play out and let people figure out where we were going to end up on some of these. I don't think we've had as many what you might call open or at least structured rules, quasi-open, whatever you want to call it, as we should, this Congress. I do believe that we had moved a good number of things in a good direction for a while in terms of, you know, we had 1,100 votes on amendments. My colleagues on the other side of the aisle would say that they didn't get all the ones that they want, and I get that, and that's how this works when we go through the process, but could be better, could be worse. But yeah, I think, you know, we had 10 appropriations bills get out of committees, 7 that got off the floor. I think some things were moving in the right direction, and unfortunately that came to a halt. And so now we're doing everything essentially by suspension of the rules. I mean, that's pretty much all we've done since, you know, November 1, effectively. And so that's what we did last night. We passed a massive tax bill by suspension of the rules. By the way, on a very bipartisan basis. I mean, I do want to point out that more Democrats than Republicans voted last night for a bill that had massive tax advantages for corporations. That's just true. 180-something Democrats, 170-something Republicans voted for that bill. And I voted against it for reasons that are well publicized last night and on the floor and otherwise, about my concerns about the child tax credit, its expansion, its applicability to parents who are here illegally, who have children that were born here. And we can debate those policies, but the fact is we just did it on suspension. People say, well, why would you claim time in opposition to the bill? Well, because somebody should. Somebody should. What happens in this town is we do things like that, and you go down to the floor, and then there's two parties, and they bring it up together, and then they split the time, and then it's just share the time, and there's a kumbaya, and everybody does their 1-minute speech, and then they send it out to constituents. Which constituents? I don't know, the K Street constituents, and say, look, we got your expensing, we got your R&D, we got your interest deduction, and then the average hardworking American out there is going, what the hell did I get? That's the truth. And we didn't have an open process. We didn't have amendments. We didn't have the ability to make changes that we ought to do for the hardworking families out there. Meanwhile, I have to oppose the bill for the reasons I explained last night on the floor. So now here we are, and we've got to make a decision about this. And if we're going to have a debate about SALT, then we ought to have a debate about SALT in the context of all of the other issues. I think it's important to have this debate about the essentially marriage penalty, if you will, on this. It's real, and it does affect some what you would call middle-income earners, but it also affects people who are not middle-income earners. There's a cap on this one. I'm trying to process the cap. It's $500,000. I put it in the context. I have no idea. I haven't been able to study it. I haven't been able to look at it and see, well, what's the actual impact? How much of this is going to wealthy earners? How much of this is going to middle-income earners? I think our whole system is pretty corrupted, by the way, from top to bottom. As I said in the Budget Committee, my Democratic colleagues will sit there and say, you can't even mention the word Social Security and Medicare when we're talking about literally voting on a debt commission. You can't mention it. But on the other side of the aisle, you can't mention taxes, or I don't know, Grover Norquist is going to come after you with some sort of, hammer or something for violation of some pledge you took 12 years ago. And this is where we are in this town. And the point is, we ought to actually sit down and figure out what we're going to do. To my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, I've said repeatedly in this room, these complaints about how the tax cuts of Bush, Trump, or any otherwise have somehow harmed our ability to have revenue is belied by the evidence of the highest revenue we've ever had, like upwards of 20% of GDP. Like just the math, the charts put out by the Federal Reserve belies the very accusation that somehow tax cuts are in and of themselves restrictive of revenue as opposed to potentially causing additional revenue because you're allowing people to create wealth. I might disagree with where some of those things are allocated. Maybe more should be for small businesses. Maybe more should be for different things. But have that debate. But don't sit there and just throw out these accusations that somehow having tax relief, including the ones yesterday that 188 or whatever the number was Democrats voted for, that the expensing issues, the R&D issues, that doesn't create economic growth. Can we at least acknowledge that a bunch of my Democratic colleagues believe that? They do. They're on the floor saying so. They're out talking about it. It's true. So let's just stop the that means this is all stuff that's just to benefit corporations. Look, I'm not sure here the right approach. I do not believe this is regular order in any way, shape, or form because I literally have no idea the impact of this legislation as I sit here and look at it because we didn't do it through regular order, didn't go through a committee. I don't have the report sitting there saying this is what this bill will do. I don't have the CBO score. I don't have the time to look at it. To the extent it's a 72-hour rule, it's okay. It's only if we don't vote on this until next week. But we didn't get the benefit of that here in the rule, debating the rule in the Rules Committee. And I just think that's a problem. I think this is not the way we should be doing things. And I don't think the vote last night is the way we should be doing things. And I think there are so many areas here where we could actually have bipartisan or at least multiple forces within the conference, despite our violent disagreements on a lot of different things, be able to come together on some of these issues to make a good decision for the American people. Like, biggest applause line I get if I go out and talk to constituents at home is banning stock trading among members of Congress. And I get it out there, and that's Abigail and I have that bill, and others do, and it's like, well, are we ever going to have that conversation or debate? I don't know. Ask the Uniparty. I'm not sure. But there are ways here to try to find a path forward on some of the things we agree on. But jamming through this rule on, at 9:30 in the morning on Thursday on a flyout day is not how I prefer to do things. So I'm conflicted, not 100% sure what my vote will look like here or on the floor. I'm figuring that out based on what I'm listening to today. But I want to say for the record that, I've had Mr. Lawler has been 100% forthcoming with us, colleagues, like what he wants to accomplish. I applaud his efforts to do that. I'd like to see us have votes on these measures so that we can debate them. There are pieces, I do believe that, last point I'll make, there's a reason a lot of people have been fleeing, and I think Mr. Lawler, you might agree, fleeing New York to jurisdictions like Florida or South Carolina or Texas. And one of those reasons is the high tax rates. Well, part of that, right, is once you remove the federal subsidization of those high rates, right, then that suddenly is hitting even harder. So people go, well, gosh, I'd really like to be in Florida with 0% income tax, or I'm going to be in Tennessee with 0% income tax or lower property taxes. Texas, we've got 0% income tax, but our property taxes are pretty daggum high. And so, this actually would hit home with some of my constituents, right? Some of my constituents who are in that kind of upper middle would say, I might get a little benefit out of this bill that you're suggesting. But I haven't been able to process that or analyze it and think about it on a macroeconomic scale across the nation. And that is what's bothersome to me. Again, we're supposed to go through this process so we can do that. So I applaud what you're trying to do. If I end up voting against the rule, it's not because of you, and it's not out of disrespect for anybody or it's just trying to make sure that we can try to fix this place. I yield back.